Hello to all of you there. We're glad to be back. If you're new to this session, we're glad to have you. So this is the Buddhist service, or the Eastern religion service today. It is August the 26th of 2020. And as I said, we're very glad to be back with you. I'm Ms. Shepherd. I'll let my colleague introduce herself, and then we'll talk a bit about how the session will go.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ms. Ross. Just really grateful to be able to be here with you. Keep watching the news and thinking about you all as this lockdown continues, and just hope that you're doing as well as you can, and that you're staying healthy and staying calm and staying and doing your practice, and hopefully that's helping. And just really grateful to be able to be here thinking of you. Take care.
Thank you. So we'll run the session today as we have in the past. I'll go and I'll light the candles and the incense. I'll bow three times. If you want to join me, please do. I'll come back. I'll put a chant up on the screen, the same chant we've been doing every time. We'll do the chant, and then we'll go right into a guided meditation, which I'll lead today. Following that, we'll have a conversation, and we'll do our closing. If there's time, we might do a short meditation at the end as well. We'll see how it goes today. So as I'm sure all of you are well aware, this is a hard time in the country. We are almost at 180,000 deaths from COVID. And it seems that likely that we will hit 200,000 by the end of the year, or even more. And of course, on Sunday, 2 days ago now, there was another shooting of a Black man in our state, in Wisconsin. And of course, the response has been immediate and intense, and the community is filled with grief. The state, hopefully the nation, is filled with grief. And so actually what we're going to be talking about today is this idea of caring about people, caring about suffering, and the kind of pain that causes us, and how can we feel for people? How can we care and yet still have some steadiness of heart and strength, so that we ourselves aren't pulled into suffering? So that's the big task we're going to look at today. So I will go and light the candles. Now let us chant the reflections on universal well-being. May I abide in well-being, in freedom from affliction, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may I maintain well-being in myself. May everyone abide in well-being, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may they maintain well-being in themselves. May all beings be released from all suffering, and may they not be parted from the good fortune they have attained. When they act upon intention, all beings are the owners of their action and inherit its results. Their future is born from such action, companion to such action, and its results will be their home. All actions with intention, be they skillful or harmful, of such acts they will be the heirs. So coming into this very moment, opening our heart to what is present right now in the body and in the mind. How is the body right now? And how is the mind? Observing it, knowing it, being aware of it, not thinking about it. That's a subtle distinction, and an important one. It has to do with connecting to the felt sense. How are you feeling right now? To me, the analogy of weather is always helpful. Is today a stormy day in the body or the mind? Is it a bright sunny day? Is it sort of overcast? Or is it bright but with a few clouds? Sort of an even day. Recognizing that our moods and thoughts are very much like the weather, and that they move in without our intention, without our wish of them moving in, without our control. And becoming aware of what the weather is how we respond to it with wisdom, with clarity. So in terms of actual weather, if it's cold, we know to put on a jacket. If it's rainy, we take an umbrella, or we put our jacket over our heads. If it's hot, we try to find shade. So we do those same things with our mental states and our bodily states. We're not controlling them or fixing them or changing them, but we're responding to them with wisdom. So if the body is very tight and tense, uncomfortable, we do what we can to not force it to be comfortable, but to notice if we've tightened up anywhere. Are we holding muscular tension that we don't need to hold? It actually could be released. Noticing. Most of us are aware that we have places in the body where maybe we frequently tighten. So checking in with those places. If If it's your neck or your shoulders, your forehead, your jaw. Maybe it's your hip joint or your thighs. Have your hands tightened up? Are they loose? Allowing whatever relaxation and release we can to be present in the body. Not forcing it, not feeling that we can absolutely control it, but noticing where are the areas we can have some influence. And in those areas, bringing release and relaxation. And we notice the mental energy, the mental weather, the heart weather as well. Because when the heart is grieving, frightened, worried, angry, the body tightens too. So if we can be aware of what's happening in the heart, we can be more wise in paying attention to the body. Knowing there's likely some tension in the body, can I identify where that is and see about releasing that bodily tension? Because very often, the more we're able to release, soften, widen, open through the body, the more the mental and heart tension can also release. Not completely, it's not a magical pill, but slowly. And with continued relaxation and resting in the body, the grip of the mind and the heart weakens too. So taking this opportunity to really stay with the body. Stay with the breath. How can you relate to the breath in a way that is completely kind, interested, soft, open, and wide? Just resting with each in-breath and each out-breath. Not zoning out and falling asleep, staying alert but relaxed. Thinking of attaching your awareness to the breath. To the process of the breath as it breathes in and out. Maybe you feel the breath very physically, almost like a wave. Maybe you feel movement of air around the nose. Maybe you feel movement in the belly. Whatever you feel, connect your attention as firmly but softly. Firmly in the sense of with a lot of clear intention to stay present with each breath. Softly in the sense of not tightening up. Really setting a kind determination for yourself that for these next minutes, you will do your very best to rein in the wandering mind and to stay with the breath. And each time the mind might wander away, you gently notice and just return to the breath. Not allowing yourself to get caught up in irritation or disappointment or anger when the mind wanders, because that actually keeps you away from the breath longer. Just as soon as it's wandered and you noticed, oh, that's not where I want to be. I want to be right now. My intention was to stay with each in-breath and each out-breath. And the longer and more consistently that you're able to do that, the easier it becomes, because the mind becomes engaged with the breath. It becomes interested. You realize that that staying with the in-breath and the out-breath can become a place of relative ease and peace. You're not being called upon to react to anything. This really is your opportunity to let our very busy minds, our constantly stimulated minds, to rest. In this way, the meditation is actually more restful than sleep. Because when we sleep, of course, there are dreams, and sometimes it's not at all restful. But when we can continue to develop our intention to just stay with the breath, this can become the most restful, restorative time of the day. And we all need that. We need to give our minds that kindness of giving them some rest. So each week, or 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, we see you. We've told you that we would love to hear from you and to be able to respond directly to what you're interested in, what you're thinking about. And I'm very happy to report that we did get some feedback, and thank you so very much for sending that. So I am going to try. That's actually what sparked my decision to talk about what I thought I would talk about today. So this person sent a number of very useful questions. One of them refers to the Dhammapada, but didn't give the verse. And I think if you'd be willing to write back with the verse that you're referring to, we might understand exactly what you were hoping we'd talk about a little more. So I'm going to talk about a few of the things you've written about, but if you might want to let us know more about what your question was on that Dhammapada verse, I would be very happy to talk more about the Dhammapada. So there are 3 questions this person sent. He sent 6, but I'm going to sort of try, hopefully, address 3. And I guess the other thing I'd say is, if I'm not hitting what you intended in writing these questions, again, please write that and let us know how we can do better next time. And for those of you who didn't write, I hope this might sort of be an impetus, a spark, to help you decide, oh, well, I'll write a question too, because we really do love hearing from you. It really feels really nice. Sometimes, talking to the screen, it can almost feel like, is there really anybody out there? So to know there really is people out there is very helpful to us too. So I'll read the 3 questions that I'm going to try to talk around and hopefully address. The first one is it possible to care enough to empathize with people without love? And second one is, can you love without caring? And the third one is, although childhood thoughts plague society, I think he means childishness, is there an opportunity to think outside of ourselves to become more understanding individuals? So those are beautiful questions. And ones I've also considered and wondered about, and really quite towards the beginning of the pandemic, and then right around the time of George Floyd, and now with Jacob Blake, they seemed particularly important and appropriate questions. And right around that time, I came across this really so useful talk by a monk. The monk's name is Ajahn Munindo, and the talk, this was a transcribed talk, so it's in a book of his talks, but it was originally given orally. And the name of the talk is Unafraid to Care. And it struck me so deeply because, as I said, I read it right at the beginning of the pandemic when there was so much news about essential workers and healthcare providers and how they were struggling, how deeply they cared for the people they were trying to help, and how difficult it was because despite all the care, people were dying. They couldn't really prevent their deaths. And of course, each of us have been in a situation like that where we've seen our own relatives become very sick. We've ourselves suffered deeply. And we see the family and friends of Jacob Blake, George Floyd, the many others, Breonna Taylor, the many others. We see them, we care for them. We care about their suffering, and yet we feel, how can I help? What can I do? And so sometimes that caring feels like more suffering. It feels like the caring itself adds suffering to our life. And so the question arises, well, is caring just, can I care without ever suffering? Is the price of caring to suffer? That's really what I want to address. And I'll give you a preview. I absolutely do not think the price of caring is to suffer. I think we can care without adding that piece of suffering. But that's what I want us to reflect on today. So let me read you a little bit from this article, this Dhamma talk by Ajahn Munindo. He says, the feelings we have when we care for another occupy a special place in our hearts. To care deeply for another feels like a blessing. That's true, isn't it? It's a beautiful thing to care for people. He says, remember how the Buddha taught about cultivating loving kindness. He asks us to hold in our minds an image of a mother with her only child. He wants us to focus on the mother's regard for her child and give rise to a heartfelt appreciation for the beauty of selfless caring, that it's a beautiful thing to care. He says, similarly, the feeling of being truly cared for is a wonderful feeling. To receive caring from another is like receiving warmth when we are cold or receiving food when we are hungry. It's a type of nourishment, and it's an essential nourishment. And absolutely, hopefully, we've all felt that too. To know how important it is for us to feel others are caring for us. And he continues, he says, so let's look at what is it that might get in the way, obscure the beauty of caring? Why is it that sometimes that beauty, that blessing of caring, quickly turns into suffering? He says we're all familiar with the way in which affection leads to hurt when a relationship is damaged or lost. If we've experienced such suffering after having met the Buddhist teachings on the Four Noble Truths, we may have wondered whether it's really possible to both care deeply and to be free from suffering. It's a really important question. Certainly one I've encountered, and I expect most of you have questioned that too. Is it possible to care deeply and be free from suffering? Can we care without becoming caught in clinging and leaving ourselves vulnerable to agonizing heartache? When we lose someone we care for, or even when we see the losses of people we don't know personally, as has been happening with all of the COVID deaths and with all of the shootings, we feel it. We don't have to know them personally to feel it, to care. As caring people, we feel the pain for others in difficult situations. We've felt this our whole life. True, right? Our whole life. From when we were very little, watching a classmate get bullied. When we were young, or maybe the deep friendship we felt for our playmates. We've felt this our whole lives. And as we got older, we care for our family members, the people we hung out with, the people we entered into relationship with. And as we got older, more sophisticated, more mature, we cared for the people we hear about in tornadoes and war zones, starving, refugees, people caught in slave trade, or the hundreds and hundreds of other stories that we hear. Stories from our cellmates, from the people we meet there in the prison. Stories that touched our hearts, and we respond with care. And that's a beautiful thing. But sometimes, after intense experiences, being hurt in relationships, or maybe serving in a caring profession and taking on more pain than we actually were able to manage, sometimes people decide that caring results in more personal suffering than we can stand. And we decide to stop caring, that caring is too painful. And they make a decision, I think not a wise decision, but a decision that the only way to be protected from suffering is to stop caring. Or maybe they decide to continue to care, but assume that suffering is the price they have to pay. And in fact, we even have a sort of saying, a common saying about that. Maybe you've heard people say this, that suffering is the price we pay for having cared about something or someone. And like many common sayings, I think this is one that maybe we've heard and kind of just assumed was true without really considering it. But what I hope you'll do today during the session, but maybe even after the session, is to begin to reflect deeply for yourself whether you feel you really whether you are willing to believe that suffering is the inescapable result of really caring about anyone or anything. Are suffering and caring so tightly interlinked that they always occur together and that they have to occur together? Is there a way that they can be separated so that we can care and not add that burden of suffering? Because if our answer is yes, these are so intricately linked that they always occur together, then isn't that the same as saying that caring is suffering? And does that make sense, to say caring is suffering? Because if caring for someone or something opens our hearts, feeds us, feeds our spirit, how can that be the same as suffering? To me, that just doesn't make sense. So what we want to question, ask for ourselves, is there some feeling of warmth or connection or caring that also isn't suffering? That's our question. And here's how the Ajahn answers it. He says the implication of that saying is that suffering is inescapable if we really care about anyone or anything. Surely to accept such a view conditions us into a fear of wholehearted caring. Makes sense, right? Why would we want to care if we think it's always going to lead to suffering? And he says that can't be the way. One of the most important principles which the Buddha's awakening revealed to us is that we are not obliged to suffer. Suffering is a choice. It's true that all beings experience pain, both those that are awakened and those who are not. But turning pain into suffering is something extra that we do. Physical pain or emotional pain, subtle pain or gross pain, are all part of being human. When we resist pain out of an unawareness and cling, we are adding to it. We complicate it. We are causing the suffering. The Buddha's teachings are an invitation to question, to inquire, to find out for ourselves whether it is true that we can't care without being caught in clinging. So that's the question for our own heart, the question we need to investigate. I think the question that I was being asked here. Is it possible to care, to empathize without love? So I think what he's asking here, or in the next one, can one love without caring? I think that caring is, metta, is an unconditional caring for other beings. And I think the question we want to ask is, can we have that kind of unconditional caring without it generating suffering? Because we see the suffering that is everywhere. So what I'd like to propose is that it might actually be the case that caring is not necessarily linked to suffering. To me, it makes more sense that caring is one thing and suffering is something else. That sometimes they are both present, but that doesn't mean they need to be linked. So the Ajahn asks a further question. He says, how do we inquire into this conundrum, this confusion, this state of wanting to live with caring and sensitivity, wanting to be a caring human being, while at the same time honoring the Buddha's awakening, remembering that suffering is not an obligation? So his answer is that we can't really think ourselves out of this situation. Instead, we need to use tools more subtle than just kind of trying to make lists and think it through. And the difference is, instead of thinking it through with our brain, we feel it through with our hearts. And he identifies 3 tools that we want to use. He says we have to start with mindfulness. We all know that. Mindfulness as the gatekeeper, as the way we are watchful for when caring is present and when maybe some suffering has snuck in too. And then we want to consider, well, how do I let in caring and not let in the suffering? So the second tool he talks about is sense restraint. The ability to set boundaries and stay with them. Boundaries in terms of what we take in. Here, the boundaries he's talking about are to say no to the sort of exuberance, as the word he uses, the excesses that disrupt the heart and lead us to get lost. So here, of course, one of the primary ways in which we sometimes need to restrain the senses is through the media. That I firmly believe in the importance of an educated electorate, an educated community. I want people to know what's happening in the world. I think it's our responsibility to know. And at the same time, we have to know our heart. We have to know, okay, this is so upsetting that I need to take a break, that I've learned enough for now, and I need to pull back because I can feel how it is leading to suffering. It's too much. It's overwhelming. That what our practice is about is strengthening our heart so that we can handle, stay steady with more and more information. But until we're there, we have to protect our hearts. We can't let our caring flop over into suffering, because the suffering will overwhelm the caring. Here's a quote from the Ajahn again. He says, when sense restraint is well developed, we have an ability to contain reactions, neither following nor denying them. Thus, the feelings that arise are available for investigation, and we don't have to be yanked around by those feelings. And the third tool is wise reflection. With mindfulness, with watching what's sometimes called guarding the sense doors, watching what's coming in and whether we can handle it, we have more ability for inner awareness. We can read our own hearts, as Ajahn Chah always encouraged. We can have a sense of how we're reacting and know, are we able to sustain our humanity, our caring, that a very important, significant quality we want to encourage: caring, humanity. And can we do that in a way that doesn't let that suffering pollute the caring? So let me stop at that point, and let Miss Ross respond in any way she'd like. And then at the end, I'll share with you a little bit of Ajahn Wanindo's beautiful concluding part. Miss Ross.
Thank you, Ms. Shepherd. Yeah, this is such it feels like a complex thing, and something, if we try to think, as you mentioned, if you try to think your way out of it, that just adds another layer of suffering. All the questions that came up, and the just the different ways they're stated, they're really kind of all having to do with how can this heart be open and care, but at the same time not be overwhelmed. Like, that's really what feels like the question is. And how can the heart be open to everybody? I think there was one in there about, can you love without caring, or what, I mean, all of these, you know, can we love our enemies? That kind of thing is embedded in all of this too. How can the heart be open to everyone, but not weighed down by that openness? And I think for me, when I think about this, what really comes to mind is the Buddha's definition of what suffering is. You know, we go back to the Four Noble Truths again, you know, so there is suffering, like it does occur. And what causes it is clinging, is holding on, is wanting things to be a certain way, you know, like I'm going to love you, but it has to be this way, you know. And so we want things, or you know, the simplest definition I've ever heard of suffering is wanting things to be other than they are, right? So you care deeply about somebody and they're in a situation that you'd like to fix, but you know, it's like a conditional love. I can have my heart open as long as this is fixed. The question is, can we just have the heart be open without holding on to having to have a resolution to this, you know? And so noticing that difference between the movement of the open heart, and then notice when that suffering starts sneaking in of wanting things to be a certain way, because there's that clinging, there's that. So it's just like everything else that we're practicing with, we're trying to notice when that holding on actually happens. Like, so that's like what I tune into when I'm working with this. And I don't know about you all, but in my practice, how do I know when I'm holding on? Body tension. You know, the body reminds me, oh, you're tensing up. What am I holding on to? Oh, I'm holding on to wanting them to be like this, not like how they are. You know, I'll love you as long as you're like this. Well, they are what they are, you know. So that's what I really pay attention to, is like just really noticing. It's just like everything else in my practice. When is that clinging? When is that holding on? When is that wanting it to be different? When is that sneaking in? And so I can notice, real for me, and it's like, when does the heart start to tighten up? And then we can use our wisdom, as Ms. Shepherd talked about, use the wisdom to ask the question, like, what am I holding on to right now? Oh, I'm holding on to this wanting this situation to be fixed, you know? And so, and then can I let go of that need and just be with how it is? And you know, see if that softens the heart. That softening, as in the meditation, she gave the instruction, you know, soften and widen. Can I let the heart and body soften and widen? And then does that allow me to be with it? So that's kind of how I work with it. And this reminds me, there's a song that I love that by a guy who nobody ever knows who he is, but the lines go, can you love without needing? Hold it up like a silent prayer. Like that's, so it's the needing part. Can we love without needing it to be a certain way? Can be, and hold that up as a, and then can you open your heart without bleeding? Take that open heart everywhere. So those are the lines in this song that I carry with me as a way to practice. And my body is my gateway to seeing when I am starting to tighten up, and it tells me time to pay more attention to how I'm reacting to this. So that's my thoughts on this.
Yeah, wonderful. And I think just what you said, the question was, is there an opportunity to think outside ourselves to become more understanding? Yes, absolutely. That it's not easy. But yes, that's what being a human allows us to do, to care about everyone, to care for the humanity. You know, when we see people on the television, that's often what they're asking, where was the humanity? That's what we're aiming at, caring. That's metta. That's unconditional acceptance. That's recognizing that just as I want to be happy, all beings want to be happy. They're doing it in a way I don't get. They're doing it, they're saying things maybe that don't make any sense to me, but I understand they too are trying to understand this world and doing the best they can, just as I'm doing the best I can. And I can care about them and care for them and not have to agree with them, not have to support what they do. But that also doesn't mean that I have to hate them, try to harm them, try to interfere with their ability to live their life, as long as they are not interfering with anybody else's ability to live their life. So I think we have a few minutes. Let's end with a before I share Janmanindo's conclusion here. Let's do a 4-minute or 5-minute meditation. Miss Ross will lead that one.
Yeah, so as my teacher would say, we can let go of the words and just stop trying to think it through and just be with how we receive what was just discussed. So we'll let the bell take us in. So coming into the body, just feeling whatever sensations we feel in the body that have been brought on by listening and thinking about this idea of the open heart, the caring heart. So just feel what the sensations are in the body. Maybe you'll feel a pulsing. Maybe part of you wants to shut down. Notice if there's something that feels blocked or closed. Maybe noticing the mind feels confused, like everything just feels like it's racing around, trying to figure this out. And just notice how it is, however we're responding, maybe whether we've shut down or whether the mind is racing or we're somewhere in between, just noticing how it is. In the body, mind, right here, right now. Feeling the energy of it. Letting go of the words and the story and just feeling how it rests. And we can notice maybe as we're watching how the mind and body are right here, right now, that there's a shift in energy as we continue to watch. Maybe if the mind is still racing with questions and thinking, maybe that energy's been maintained, but maybe if we have been able to let go of the words and we're just present in the body, we might feel a softening and a widening, a shift in energy as we're just present with how it is right here, right now. And so we can invite that opening, that softening, the widening, and place our awareness in our heart center. Just say, how is the heart right here, right now? This heart, this caring heart is like this. We can bring that heart to our practice today and every minute of every day, tuning in to how the heart is, how the mind is, because they're not separate. It's like this. Can we open and soften to how it is? And notice our connection to other beings from a place of stability and openness and caring for ourselves and for all beings. May we all be at ease. May we find ways to live at ease for the benefit of all beings. Coming back into your awareness of your surroundings. Opening the eyes, just reflecting how you are. It's like this. Miss Shepherd?
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ross. So it's, it's a beautiful thing that our hearts can be touched. But it can be a scary thing too when it feels overwhelming. So really taking joy in your ability to feel for other people, that is a blessing. And learning, how do we do that without it harming, without it causing suffering, without the clinging? So here is how Ajahn Munindo ended this talk on Unafraid to Care. He says, back to our original question, is it possible to care without clinging? The Buddha and our teachers cared completely, with all their hearts, holding back nothing because they know reality. Their understanding meant they could afford to give themselves to caring fully. They had not seen beyond all doubt. They had seen beyond all doubt that clinging is not necessary and suffering is not an obligation. So instead of asking whether it's possible to care without clinging, we should be asking whether we can be here quickly enough to catch the clinging before it happens. It's the preparedness that matters. So what he's pointing to is our mindfulness, our awareness, our meditation, learning to be present for what's happening in our hearts and our minds, and to catch the clinging before it comes in and pollutes, destroys the caring. That the caring is the true nature of our heart. That suffering sneaks in through clinging, and it doesn't have to. And we have models in the Buddha and his disciples, and in people alive here and now, or who were like John Lewis, Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, Dalai Lama, Mahatma Gandhi. We have models of people, and maybe your relatives. You may have someone in your family that you know has a heart as wide as the world, cares for everyone, and doesn't take on the suffering too. So that's a beautiful aspiration. Sometimes it's more possible than other times, but to know it is possible, hopefully touches your heart, uplifts your heart, makes you feel better in this time of great suffering. So, Ms. Ross, you want to say goodbye, and then I'll say goodbye.
Yeah. Take care, everyone. This is an important thing, to pay attention to now, and these times are the perfect time to practice with this. So just wish you all well, and looking forward to seeing you again in a couple of weeks. Take care.
Yeah, do take care of yourself, and know that learning to care for yourself and to protect that caring heart and protect it from that suffering, that clinging that comes in, that is a gift not only to yourself, that is not selfish. That is a gift to the whole world, that you become the light that helps others see the way out. So our wish for you is that you become the light. Take care of yourself, be well, and we'll hope to see you in a couple of weeks. Oh, and send more questions and explain if I didn't quite get your questions right this time. We'll see you soon.